Hello everyone, thanks for joining us here on Horizon. Well, the good news is that Oklahoma's 5-year drought, for all intents and purposes, is over for the majority of the state. Lakes are full and many are overflowing to the point of catastrophe, which we'll explore a little later in our show. But first I want to bring in Oklahoma's state climatologist to talk about just how significant recent rains have been. Gary McManus, thank you so much for joining us. So in talking about the rains, Gary, we hear the words record-breaking and unprecedented bannered about. So give us your perspective.
Well, when we take a look at the state as a whole, just for the month of May, with over 14 inches of rain, we absolutely shattered the record for the previous month, wettest month on record, which was October 1941, about 10.75 inches. So when you beat the previous record for the month over the entire state by about 3 inches, well, that's extremely significant.
Is it fair to say then that our drought is over?
The drought, for all intents and purposes, is over. We've had periods of relief before during this 4.5 to 5 year drought. However, this is the first time that we've seen this type of relief across western Oklahoma, where that drought has been especially entrenched over the last 4.5 years.
Now, we all have seen with the heat how quickly things can just dry up. Now, May was a fairly cool month. What are the long-term projections for the coming months in terms of heat and moisture?
Well, of course, the rainy season for Oklahoma runs through mid-June, so even though, we might not get the types of rains we saw last summer, the National Weather Service's Climate Prediction Center is seeing indications of a wetter than normal summer for Oklahoma, at least increased odds for that above normal precipitation. So that would be nice, but we're also seeing the buildup of that El Nino down in the equatorial Pacific waters and the associated changes in the atmosphere. This gives us hope, once we get past summer, that we might see this wet pattern continue, and therefore the drought would not return suddenly like it has in the past over this last half decade.
So Gary, oftentimes when we experience such an event like this past May, it's only human nature to read more into it than the actual facts may suggest. Just like last winter when people were pointing towards the cold weather as proof that climate change wasn't real. Are we being anecdotal if we look at the May rains and say they are evidence of more extreme weather that climate change can cause?
It's hard to say. Now, when we beat an all-time precipitation record across the entire state by almost 3 inches, that is extremely significant. And Texas did the exact same thing. So the Southern Plains, something very significant, very historic happened during May for both states. Now, whether to say that is part of the findings that climate science has seen in the past, that more intense precipitation events are occurring at a greater frequency, it's too early to say right now. That's not how climate science works. That's not how science works in general. We really do need to wait and let those scientists study the weather patterns of what occurred during May and even earlier into April and see what the causes were.
So a final question for you, Gary. You always talk about your pond that you grew up by back in Buffalo, Oklahoma. How's it doing right now?
It's doing great. It looks just like it did right before the drought started back in May 2009. It's not overflowing. Buffalo, that area in northwest Oklahoma, hasn't gotten quite as much rainfall as the rest of the state, but they've gotten enough to alleviate all drought impacts, including those dry farm ponds, the soil moistures. It's really nice and green up there, as we've seen by the latest picture. So things are all hunky-dory again for that pond. All we need now is to stock it with fish, because I have great hopes that this drought is over for good and we're going to go back to a period where it'll keep some water in it this time.
All right. Thank you so much for taking time to visit with us. Gary McManus, Oklahoma's state climatologist.